I could still hear my father's voice echoing in my head the moment I walked into that grand office. "You'll get nothing from your grandfather's will, Emily. Nothing." He said it with such certainty, such cruel delight, that for a second I almost believed him. My father had always looked at me as the family's weakest link, the daughter born only to be overlooked, while my brother Jason carried the torch of his pride. As I sat down at the long mahogany table, surrounded by greedy relatives and hungry eyes, I clutched my grandfather's pearl bracelet, his last gift to me, like a lifeline. My heart pounded against my ribs as the lawyer adjusted his glasses, scanning the pages. My father leaned back in his chair, smirking. Jason smirked too. And then, the lawyer looked up, met my eyes and smiled. In that moment, I knew everything was about to change. "My name is Emily Carter, and if you ask my father, Richard, he'll tell you I was born to disappoint him. I don't say that with bitterness, it's just the truth I grew up with." In his eyes, my older brother Jason was everything. Smart, ambitious, ruthless. He was the heir to the Carter name, the one who could do no wrong. And me? I was the daughter, the afterthought, the child who was supposed to stay quiet, marry someone respectable, and vanish into the background. I remember one evening at dinner, Jason had just come home with a glowing report card, another perfect A in economics. Dad lifted his glass of wine, beaming. "Jason is the future of this family," he declared proudly, raising his glass like a toast. Then his eyes flicked to me, and his tone sharpened. "And you, Emily, should focus on finding a husband rich enough to tolerate you." The table went silent. My mother, Melissa, gave me the smallest glance of pity, but she didn't say a word. She never did. Jason chuckled under his breath, enjoying the moment. I stared down at my plate, cheeks burning, promising myself I wouldn't cry where they could see. But not everyone in the Carter family saw me as useless. My grandfather, William Carter, was different. With his billion-dollar empire and stern presence, he could have been intimidating, but to me, he was warmth. He'd sneak me out of the mansion to get ice cream, sit me on the hood of his old Cadillac, and talk to me like I mattered. "You're my fighter, Emily," he'd say, tapping my chin with his finger. "Jason may have the charm, but you," he'd smile, eyes twinkling, "you've got grit." Those moments kept me alive. When Dad's scorn cut too deep, I clung to Grandpa's words like lifelines. And then he died. At the funeral, Jason stood tall beside Dad, the perfect son comforting the grieving patriarch. I lingered at the edge of the crowd, clutching Grandpa's pearl bracelet, my last gift from him. When I approached the casket, Dad leaned close and whispered in my ear, venom in his tone. "Don't expect a penny from him, Emily. You'll walk away empty-handed, just like you deserve." The words carved into me like ice. But deep down, I held on to one fragile hope, that Grandpa hadn't forgotten me. That somewhere in his $7 billion will, he had left me more than scraps. Little did I know, he had left me everything. The day of the will reading arrived cloaked in tension. The law firm was one of those towering buildings downtown, all marble floors and polished brass, the kind of place that smelled of power and money. As I stepped into the conference room, the air felt thick, heavy with expectation. Relatives I hadn't seen in years filled the room, whispering in corners, their eyes darting like hawks circling prey. Aunts in pearls, cousins in tailored suits, all of them pretending to mourn while secretly calculating what they'd walk away with. Jason was already there. He leaned against the wall, perfectly groomed, his expensive suit hugging his broad shoulders. When he saw me, his lips curled into that smug half-smile I'd grown to hate. "You actually showed up," he murmured as I passed. "Of course," I replied, forcing my voice not to waver. He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "Prepare to be humiliated." I clenched my jaw and kept walking. At the head of the long mahogany table sat my father, Richard Carter, patriarch, king. He didn't rise when I entered, didn't even smile. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was an unwelcome guest. "Emily," he said smoothly, his voice carrying just enough disdain to slice through me. "I almost told them not to expect you." I met his stare. my heart hammering. I wouldn't miss this for the world. A ripple of whispers swept across the room. Some relatives smirked, others raised their brows, surprised at my boldness. I sank into my chair, clutching Grandpa's bracelet so tightly my knuckles whitened. Then the door opened, and everything went still. Attorney Daniel Foster entered, his presence quiet but commanding. He was tall, with sharp eyes behind silver-rimmed glasses, and he carried the weight of authority like a second skin. He set a thick folder on the table, adjusting his tie before he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We are gathered to read the last will and testament of William Carter." The room hushed. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner sounded deafening. Jason sat straighter, clearly eager. Dad leaned back in his chair, his smirk already carved into his face. Daniel opened the folder, flipping to the first page. His voice rang steady and formal. "To my beloved grandson, Jason Carter. I leave the Carter penthouse on 5th Avenue, with all furnishings included, and a cash inheritance of $20 million. Gasps echoed. Jason's smile spread, smug and victorious. He turned his head slightly, mouthing the words, "Told you so." My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to sit tall, to keep my face unreadable. I had been invisible for so long. I refused to let him see fear now. Daniel's hand moved to the next page. His eyes lifted, meeting mine, and he smiled. In that single moment, my father's smirk faltered, and my pulse thundered in my ears. Daniel cleared his throat, the crisp sound slicing through the heavy silence like a blade. He adjusted his glasses and let his gaze travel slowly across the room, as though savoring the anticipation. When his eyes finally landed on me, I felt my chest tighten. Then, unmistakably, he smiled. His voice carried steady authority. "To my granddaughter, Emily Carter, I leave controlling interest in Carter Global Enterprises, along with all subsidiary companies, real estate holdings, and assets valued at approximately $5 billion. The room exploded. Chairs scraped, voices rose, gasps filled the air like gunfire. Jason's smug expression shattered, his mouth dropping open as if he'd been punched. My father bolted upright, his chair crashing against the wall. "What?" Dad bellowed, his voice so sharp it seemed to rattle the windows. "This is outrageous. There must be some mistake." Daniel didn't flinch. "There is no mistake, Mr. Carter. These were William Carter's explicit instructions." Jason slammed his fist on the table, making the water glasses jump. "She's not capable, she's weak, naive. She'll destroy everything Grandpa built." I sat frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. For a heartbeat, their voices blurred, their fury almost drowning me. But then I looked down at the bracelet circling my wrist, the small pearls gleaming softly, and I remembered Grandpa's words. "You're my fighter, Emily." I raised my head. My voice trembled, but I forced it through the storm. "Funny, Jason. Grandpa didn't think so." The whispers spread like wildfire. Some relatives covered their mouths. Others leaned closer, hungry for the drama. My father pointed a shaking finger at Daniel. "She manipulated him. She must have gotten to him when he was sick, when he wasn't thinking clearly." Daniel calmly folded the page. "Mr. Carter underwent a full psychiatric evaluation prior to signing. He was of sound mind. These wishes are valid under the law." Dad's face turned crimson, veins bulging at his temples. Jason shook his head violently, muttering curses under his breath. And me? I sat straighter. For years I had been the shadow, the overlooked daughter, the one they ridiculed. But in one sentence, everything had shifted. I felt the weight of Grandpa's decision pressing down on me, not just wealth, but trust, responsibility. I met my father's glare across the table and, for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. The silence after Daniel's words was short-lived. My father's hands slammed onto the table with such force that every glass rattled. His eyes, hard as steel, locked on me like I was an enemy soldier across a battlefield. "Emily will destroy everything," he thundered. His voice reverberated through the paneled walls. "She has no business sense, no leadership. Carter Global will collapse within months if she's at the helm." Jason jumped in, his voice dripping with contempt. "Dad's right. She's never cared about the company, She's never even set foot in the executive offices, and now she's supposed to run an empire? I forced myself to breathe evenly. My palms were slick with sweat under the table, but I refused to let them see fear. Slowly, I rose to my feet. "You mean I'll destroy your plans?" I said, staring directly at Dad. My voice cracked slightly but steadied as the words came. "Grandpa saw through you. He chose me because he trusted me. Not you. Not Jason." Gasps erupted. Some relatives exchanged glances, as though they had never heard me speak so firmly before. Jason scoffed, throwing his hands into the air. "Trust? Don't make me laugh. Grandpa trusted me. I worked in that company for years, learning every detail. And what did you do? Hide in your little world of books and charity events?" I clenched my fists. "I did what you never could be there for him. I listened. I cared when everyone else treated him like a bank account. Maybe I don't know every number in Carter Global, but Grandpa knew my heart. That's why he chose me." My father's face turned scarlet. He leaned over the table, until his face was inches from mine, his breath sharp with anger. "You are an embarrassment. Jason and I built this family name. You were supposed to stay quiet, marry well, and stay out of our way. That's all you were ever good for." The words stung like acid. The same words I'd heard all my life, but something inside me had changed. I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin. "No, Dad," I said, my voice cutting clean through the air. "Grandpa built this name, and he gave me the chance to carry it forward. You can hate me all you want, but this legacy is mine now." Jason's lips curled into a snarl. "You don't even know what legacy means." I stepped closer, eyes locked on his. "It means more than greed, Jason. More than power. It means responsibility. Something neither of you has ever understood." The room went still, the weight of my words hanging heavy. My father stared at me, shocked that I hadn't backed down, and for the first time, I realized my defiance scared him. Before the shouting could spiral further, Daniel raised his hand. His calm, measured tone cut through the chaos. "Mr. Carter anticipated this tension," he said evenly, "which is why he left. Something extra." From the leather folder, he pulled out a sealed envelope. The sight alone made the room fall silent. It was thick, cream-colored stationery, sealed with red wax, William Carter's initials pressed firmly in the center. "This," Daniel continued, holding it up for all to see, "is a personal letter, addressed specifically to Emily." The whispers started immediately. Aunts leaned toward each other. Cousins exchanged shocked looks. Jason let out a bitter laugh, his voice sharp with disbelief. Of course, another one of his sentimental tricks. He always had a soft spot for her. "Soft spot?" I snapped before I could stop myself. "He loved me." My father's palm slammed flat against the table. "We don't need to hear this nonsense. Whatever is in that envelope doesn't change the law, and it certainly doesn't change reality." "Yes, it does," I said firmly, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "Read it, Mr. Foster. Please." Daniel broke the wax seal with deliberate care, unfolding the letter. He cleared his throat, and then William Carter's words filled the room. "My dearest Emily, the world underestimated you, but I never did. I saw your strength in the quiet moments, when no one else was watching. You were the one who sat with me when I was tired. You were the one who listened when everyone else only demanded. I entrust you with this empire, not as a burden, but as recognition of your strength and your heart." The words blurred, as tears welled in my eyes. I pressed the bracelet against my wrist, clinging to his voice echoing across the silence of death. Jason scoffed loudly. "Strength? She doesn't even know how to balance a budget." Daniel didn't pause. His voice grew stronger. "Jason was raised in privilege. But you, Emily, understood humility. That is why I trust you, not because of what you know, but because of who you are. Remember, money can be gained or lost, but character endures. Protect it. Protect yourself." A hush fell over the room. Even the relatives who had once sided with my father now sat still, their expressions shifting from skepticism to something else: uncertainty, maybe even recognition. My father's jaw clenched, fury simmering behind his eyes. "He was delusional," he muttered, "manipulated." Daniel folded the letter neatly, his eyes scanning the room. Mr. Carter wrote this 6 months before his passing, when he was in good health, fully aware of his decisions. His wishes are final. The silence pressed down, thick and suffocating. Jason fumed. Dad glared, and I felt something new unfurl in my chest. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was resolve. Grandpa hadn't left me his empire by accident. He had left me his faith. And that faith, heavier than any fortune, was mine to carry. Jason's chair screeched violently against the hardwood floor as he jumped up, his face blotched red with fury. His breathing was ragged, shallow like a man cornered. "This is fraud," he screamed, his voice cracking under the weight of his rage. "You forged this. You manipulated him when he was weak, Emily. There's no other explanation." "Jason," Daniel began, his lawyer's composure unshaken. But Jason wasn't listening. He swept his arm across the table, knocking over a crystal glass, sending shards scattering across the mahogany surface. Water spread like veins, soaking the papers. "You'll regret this." Jason jabbed his finger at me, trembling. "You've ruined everything. That empire was supposed to be mine." I stood slowly, my legs trembling beneath me. My heart thundered against my ribs, but I forced my chin up. "It was never yours, Jason. It was Grandpa's, and he chose me." The room gasped, whispers erupting like static. Jason's eyes burned. "You're nothing! You've done nothing! You sat in the shadows while I worked day and night at Carter Global, and now you waltz in here." He slammed his fist so hard the wood cracked faintly. "And steal it all?" I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. "I didn't steal anything. Grandpa trusted me. That's something you could never earn." "Shut up!" Jason roared, lunging toward me. Aunt Margaret shrieked. 2 cousins leapt to their feet as if to block him. My father caught Jason's arm, yanking him back just before his fury could spill into violence. "Enough!" Dad barked, though his voice carried no calm, only venom. He glared at me, his face twisted with rage. "Over my dead body will you sit in Grandpa's chair? You are an embarrassment, Emily. You've always been." The words sliced deep, familiar wounds reopening. But this time, the pain fed something else, something sharp and unyielding. I lifted my chin. My voice came steadier than I felt. "Then, you'd better get used to being embarrassed, because I'm not backing down." The relatives gasped again, the room alive with shock. Never in my life had I spoken back to him this way. Dad's hand trembled as he pointed at me. "You are weak, soft. This family needs power, not pity. Jason has the drive, the ambition, and the greed." I cut in. "He has your arrogance, your cruelty. That's why Grandpa bypassed him." Jason's face contorted like a man possessed. "Say that again." I stared him down. "Grandpa knew you only wanted control, not responsibility. And Dad? He knew you'd twist his empire into a weapon, the same way you twist your words. That's why he chose me." The room had become a storm. Voices colliding, relatives muttering, some siding with me, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The chandelier above seemed to tremble with the tension. Jason ripped free from Dad's grip, his body trembling with rage. "I'll contest this will. Fraud. Undue influence. I'll drag you through every courtroom in this country until you're bankrupt and disgraced." Daniel's voice cut through like a gavel. "You can try, Jason. But I assure you, your grandfather took every precaution. Psychological evaluations, multiple witnesses, airtight legal review. His wishes are unshakable in court." Jason froze, stunned by Daniel's firmness, but only for a moment. Then his fury turned on me again, hotter than before. "You'll destroy everything, Emily," he spat. "You're not strong enough, you're not smart enough, you're nothing but a mistake." I felt the sting, yes, but this time I stood taller. "I may be all of those things in your eyes, Jason, but in Grandpa's eyes, I was enough." The air shifted. I could see it in their faces, the relatives, the board members present. They weren't sure anymore. For the first time, doubt shadowed Jason's golden boy glow. Dad's voice came low, like poison. "We'll crush you, Emily. Mark my words. You won't last a year." I met his gaze, my pulse steady now. Maybe I'll fall, but I'll fall fighting for what Grandpa believed in, and that's something you never did." For the first time, My father faltered. His lips parted, but no words came. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Jason's ragged breathing. And in that silence, I realized something monumental. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was standing in Grandpa's place, and I was ready for war. The storm left the room shaken. Jason was pacing like a caged animal, his fists still clenched, while my father sat rigid, lips pressed so tight they'd turned pale. The relatives were restless, whispering, their eyes darting between us like spectators at a gladiator match. The glass shards on the table sparkled under the chandelier, a reminder of how close we had come to tearing each other apart. But beneath the chaos, I felt something new taking root inside me. A stillness, a weight, not fear, responsibility. Daniel, ever calm, closed the folder and folded his hands neatly. "William Carter's wishes are clear," he said, his voice deliberate, steady. "Emily Carter is the majority heir. The board will convene within the month to confirm her controlling stake in Carter Global. Until then, these directives are legally binding." All eyes turned toward me. Dozens of stares pressed down, but for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I stood, drawing a breath so deep it steadied the tremor in my chest. "This isn't about money," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "It never was. Grandpa didn't choose me because of what I could take. He chose me because of what I could give." Some murmurs rose among the family. Aunt Margaret leaned forward, eyes wide. Even one of Jason's closest allies, our cousin Daniel Jr., seemed uncertain now. Jason sneered, his voice dripping venom. "Give? You'll give us ruin. You'll give us shame." I turned toward him. "No, I'll give this family what you never could. Integrity." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. A hush spread across the room. For a moment, even Jason didn't know how to answer. My father leaned back, exhaling through his nose, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "You think this makes you powerful, Emily? Power destroys people. It destroyed me. It will destroy you." I met his eyes without flinching. "Maybe power destroyed you because you used it selfishly. I'll use it differently. Grandpa didn't just hand me a company, he handed me a responsibility, and I won't waste it." For the first time, I caught a flicker in his expression, something that looked almost like hesitation. He quickly masked it, but I'd seen it. The room shifted. A board member cleared his throat. "If William trusted her, perhaps we should too." Jason whipped around. "You can't be serious. She'll tear everything down." But even his voice cracked with desperation now. The golden boy confidence he'd always worn so easily was crumbling, replaced with something raw, almost childish. I pressed the bracelet against my wrist, grounding myself. "Grandpa always told me grit mattered more than charm. That's why he chose me, and that's why I won't let him down." Daniel gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval, as if confirming I was finally stepping into the role I was meant to claim. The whispers quieted. The relatives watching me differently now, not as the overlooked daughter, but as the heir, the successor, the leader. And as Jason muttered curses under his breath and my father glared with cold fury, I realized I wasn't afraid of them anymore. For the first time, I was Emily Carter, William Carter's granddaughter, and this empire, his empire, was mine to protect. The conference room emptied slowly, like a battlefield after the smoke clears. Relatives shuffled out in clusters, their whispers trailing behind them like ghosts. Some glared at me, others looked curious, and a few even gave small nods of acknowledgement, as though they'd finally seen me for the first time. Jason stormed out ahead of them, muttering threats, his fists still clenched at his sides. My father lingered a moment longer. He stood by the door, his shadow long under the chandelier's light, his eyes fixed on me. "You think you've won," he said quietly, his voice stripped of the thunder it had carried moments before. "But you'll learn, Emily. This world doesn't care about heart or integrity. It only respects power. And when that power crushes you, don't say I didn't warn you." I swallowed, forcing myself not to look away. "Maybe you're right, Dad. Maybe this will crush me, but at least I'll try to carry it with honor. That's something you forgot how to do a long time ago." For just an instant, his mask slipped. I saw something flicker in his eyes, not softness, but recognition. Then he turned sharply, slamming the door behind him. The sudden quiet was almost overwhelming. The shattered glass on the table glistened like tiny stars under the chandelier, a reminder of the chaos that had just unfolded. My chest ached from the weight of it all, but beneath the exhaustion was something stronger: resolve. Daniel approached, placing the sealed letter back into my hands. "This belongs to you," he said gently. I nodded, clutching it tightly. "Thank you for standing firm today." He adjusted his glasses, offering a small smile. "Don't thank me, Emily. Thank your grandfather. He believed in you more than anyone else." When he left, I stood alone in the vast conference room, staring at the empire that now rested on my shoulders. It felt surreal. Only an hour ago, I had walked in as Richard Carter's overlooked daughter. Now I was William Carter's heir, holding the reins of a $7 billion legacy. I slipped the bracelet higher up my wrist, the pearls cool against my skin. The memory of Grandpa's voice echoed in my mind. "You're my fighter." Outside, the city lights gleamed through the tall windows, skyscrapers rising like giants. For years I had looked at this city as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in its sharp, glittering world. But tonight, something was different. The city didn't feel intimidating. It felt waiting for me. I thought of the employees whose lives depended on Carter Global, of the communities touched by its reach, of the future Grandpa had entrusted to me. This wasn't just about proving Jason or my father wrong. It was about proving Grandpa right. I whispered into the empty room, my voice trembling but sure. "I won't fail you." When I finally stepped outside, the night air hit me with a cool rush. Jason's angry shouts echoed faintly from the street below, my father's threats lingering in my mind, but they no longer terrified me. Their empire of fear had ended the moment Grandpa's letter was read. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Richard Carter's unwanted daughter or Jason's forgotten sister. I was Emily Carter, heir to William Carter, fighter, leader. And though battles loomed on the horizon, I felt ready to face them, ready to build something worthy of the man who had believed in me when no one else did. My story wasn't ending with Grandpa's will. It was just beginning.